Luma and the City of Sleeping Clocks. Luma found the valley in late blue evening when the air carried a taste like cool tea and the grass held a quiet that seemed to understand her steps. Beyond a curve of willow and stone the land opened to reveal an old city laid gently upon the earth. Its streets were soft with dust and its roofs were the calm color of worn copper. And everywhere she looked she saw clocks. They sat in windows with faces turned to the dimming light. They leaned upon doorframes with their mouths closed like polite creatures who wait to be spoken to. Some towered like narrow trees with crowns of brass and bell. Some rested small and round upon low walls as if they had been placed there by friendly hands. None of them moved. Each one slept in a way that did not ask for pity but invited patience. Luma stood and listened, and the city answered with a hush that was not empty but full of 1,000 gentle pauses. She walked the first street and found that the stones of the road remembered many dawns and that the echoes of old steps did not cling but drifted upward like dust and then forgot themselves. A cat with a silver ear sat on a doorstep and regarded her with kind authority. The cat's eyes were like 2 old coins that had been kept in a pocket with a sprig of mint. "Welcome, little traveler," said the quiet look and the soft tilt of whiskers. "The clocks sleep because the city asked them to sleep." It had grown tired of the rush that had hurried through its lanes and across its bridges. It asked for a long rest, and the clocks agreed. They will wake again when the air and the hearts of those who walk here have learned the shape of slow. Luma nodded and thanked the cat with a low bow, and the cat closed its eyes as if to say that thanks is a cup that fills the one who offers it. She passed under an archway of carved oak. Along its curve small birds had been carved with wings folded in peace. Inside the square beyond that arch a fountain held water that moved in a whisper hardly more than breath. A large clock stood beside the fountain with a face of pale enamel and hands shaped like leaves. "I remember what it is to turn," said the stillness of that clock. "I remember what it is to let a minute fall like a petal and to watch another arrive without noise. But now I am resting. If you will sit beside me, I will teach you how to listen, not for ticks but for the spaces that hold them." Luma settled at the edge of the fountain. The stone was pleasantly cool. The water carried a light fragrance as if a blossom somewhere nearby had decided to share its modest song. She let her breath arrive and leave without instruction. A breeze came and explored the square and found nothing to trouble it and moved on content. The sleeping clock stood like a courteous elder who chooses silence in order to let younger voices learn how to speak softly. Time did not stop while it slept. Instead, it lay down beside her like a river that knows how to slow its surface while its deeper water continues its kind work. After a while Luma rose and followed a gentle sound that was not the sound of a tick or the sound of water but something like the soft brush of cloth. It led her to a narrow lane where a ribbon of shadow and lamplight drew pattern upon the stones. Here she found a shop with large windows and a wooden sign painted with a moon and a cup of tea. Within the shop sat a person with white hair gathered like wool and a face lined with ordinary content. Upon the counter lay small tools that looked as if they had spent much of their lives listening. The person lifted a hand in welcome and poured warm water over leaves. Tea was offered in a cup that remembered many evenings. "We were the keepers of the clocks," said the eyes that watched her with friendly rest. "We wound them every morning and every night. We cleaned away dust that had learned to fall in love with gears and springs. But when the city asked for silence, we agreed. The city had given us a living blanket of kindness for a very long time. It wanted to hear what its own breath sounded like without the bright voices of the hour. So we let the clocks dream. Would you like to meet the tower that dreams the longest?" Luma drank the tea. It tasted of winter sunlight and a memory of peaches and the cool of clear water. She followed the keeper out through the shop and along the lane and into a courtyard where vines climbed a wall with care. Beyond that wall a stair rose in firm stone circles. They climbed and the city unfolded below like a map drawn by a calm hand. At the top of the stair a door waited within a square of dark oak. The keeper placed a key into the brass mouth of the lock and turned with ease. Inside stood the great bell tower with wooden ribs and quiet ropes and a set of 4 faces that had given many years to the sky. The keeper touched the rope of the bell with a fond hand and the bell answered with a polite wait. Then the keeper stepped aside and let the tower speak in its sleeping way. The tower did not speak with sound. It spoke with air and with light. Through the windows there came a slow conversation of wind. The light moved across the floor in broad shapes that looked like pages of a book turning themselves. Luma stood at the center and lifted her eyes to the great faces above. They did not turn, yet their stillness had a voice of its own. It said that rest is not empty. It said that what the city had paused in order to learn still continued learning as the shadows climbed and then drifted and then disappeared into evening. The keeper spread a blanket and invited Luma to lie down upon it. The floor was wooden and smelled of old rain and old oil and a little cinnamon from a distant festival. She lay down and felt the tower accept her weight. Beneath her the bones of the building settled by a hair and then were quiet. She thought of all the hours that had rung through this room. She imagined each bell note rising like a small bird, then folding itself into air and settling among the clouds to make a nest of memory. She imagined people below lifting their heads and smiling or turning their shoulders more easily as the bell gave them permission to pause. She imagined the city at its busiest, then the city at its slowest, then the city as it was now suspended in a generous quiet that wrapped every window and street. A feeling came to her that the tower carried not only weights and gears but promises. Promises that time would continue to show up even if no one asked it to hurry. When she rose, the keeper led her out onto the narrow balcony that wrapped the tower. The city below held the light of late day like a bowl holds clean water. Chimneys drew small lines into the sky. A laundry line crossed a rooftop, and the shirts upon it did not bother with snapping, but simply leaned and considered the breeze. Luma saw a street of fruit sellers who had covered their baskets with linen and stepped away to tell one another a quiet story. She saw children seated on the steps of a theater making a game with pebbles which mapped a tiny world as precise as any clock. She saw a baker set a loaf on a window ledge where it might cool and share its scent with anyone who needed to know that comfort exists. Everywhere she looked she saw a gentle lack of urgency that looked beautiful on everyone who wore it. The keeper looked at Luma with a warmth that needed no explanation. "Tonight the city will carry a lesson into its sleep," said the keeper. "It will go on breathing gently. It will understand that even a bell can wait. If you wish to see where the first clock agreed to rest, I can take you there." Luma nodded and they descended the stair and crossed a lane that curled around a small hill. They came to a stone building whose door had the color of almonds. Inside lay a workshop that had been tended for a generation. The benches were scarred in friendly ways. The drawers had labels written in faded ink. Here in this room a clock sat upon a cushion in the shape of a slow boat. It held within its case a forest of small shining teeth and bright axles and fine springs. It did not move. It simply was. Luma regarded the clock. She saw her own reflection in its glass. She saw the room drawn small and deep. She sat down upon a stool that had been polished by many careful hands. The keeper opened a window and the room received a line of evening air. The clock taught her a lesson by not teaching. It let her find the shape of waiting without worry. It let her see that a minute can be a room that one enters and looks around and then leaves without having moved anything. It let her feel the way a thought can set itself down and stop asking to be solved. The keeper smiled and filled 2 cups with cool water. They drank and the water tasted like a kind reminder from the oldest part of the world. When night finally arrived, it did so with an easy shoulder and a pocket full of small velvet colors. The city received night like a letter from a friend who knows how to write about ordinary things in a way that makes those things feel like gifts. Luma walked back to the square with the fountain and lay down near the base of the sleeping clock. She felt the stone through her fur in a way that told her this place had held many sleepers and had been gentle to them all. The stars appeared above the roofs as if they too wished to see a city that had chosen patience. A bird called twice from a vine and then tucked its head beneath its wing. Somewhere a door closed with the softest click. Every bridge turned into a long exhale. Every window became a smile that someone forgot to lower. As she rested, she sensed a change in the square. Not a noise, more like a movement through stillness. The sleeping clock at the fountain brightened in the smallest way. The hands did not move, but the face seemed to hold a color that she had not noticed before. A scent of apple reached her, as if the trees beyond the city had leaned forward to add their comfort. Luma closed her eyes and listened to the space where a tick might one day return. She heard instead the tide of breathing from rooms around the square and the tiny sounds of linens settling and the whisper of leaves. She sank into that tide and felt it carry her the way a patient river carries a boat that has decided not to row. Dream found her then, and this dream chose to arrive with the quiet attention of a librarian who loves a certain book and wishes to place it into the hands of a guest. In the dream she walked again through the lanes of the city, yet the doors stood a little more open and the clocks glowed a little more warmly, as if they could feel her presence. She came to a hall she had not seen in waking. Its roof arched like the underside of a great boat. Along its length stood clocks from every season of the city's life. A sand clock with slender glass that held a slow rain of gold. A water clock with a bowl that released a single drop at intervals chosen by kindness. A clock made of shadow which used a beam of moonlight reflected from a pot of milk placed upon a sill. Each was sleeping, yet each knew that sleep is a bridge rather than a stone. In the dream a child approached her with a small bundle. They unwrapped the bundle to reveal a simple wooden clock painted with blue flowers. It had been a gift from a grandparent who had laughed easily. It had kept time on kitchen shelves and on a mantel and on a desk where a letter was written once that made a long life change direction gently. The child placed the clock in her paws and said, "Please hold this while I open a window," and when the window lifted the moon came in with a silver voice, and the little clock sighed and opened its painted eye and smiled, and then closed that eye again and slept more deeply. Luma returned the bundle and the child thanked her with the serious joy that belongs to those who are still learning the weight of gratitude. The dream moved her to a garden behind the hall. Here she found plants that only bloom when a clock sleeps. A vine of soft white bells that release a scent of clean pages. A bush with small round leaves that click together in the faintest breeze and sound like the smallest chimes you ever heard, only there was no metal in them, only leaf and air. A tree that carries pods shaped like teardrops of glass, and inside each pod the slow fall of tiny seeds creates a lullaby that only sleeping clocks can hear. Luma lay beneath the tree and watched the pods sway, and she understood that nothing in this city wanted anything from her beyond the patience to notice. This gave her a form of happiness that did not glitter and did not fade. She woke while the night was still large. The square felt like the inside of a gentle bell. The fountain helped the air remain tender. She rose and walked through streets that were now the color of velvet plums. A baker was already awake and had set a tray of rolls upon a sill and had left a note that said, "Take one if you need it and bless the morning with your small hunger." Luma took a roll and it tasted of herbs and soft cheese and the idea of a friendly story told without any hurry. She left a small smooth stone from the river as thanks and continued on with a warm feeling in her chest. At the edge of the city she found a narrow bridge of stone that crossed a canal which reflected the sky like a long calm eye. On the far side of the bridge stood another clock. It was tall and slender, and its case had been carved with images of vines and birds and hands passing cups to one another. This clock too slept. Luma sat before it and whispered that she had heard the lesson and had learned that rooms of time do not need to be rushed through in order to arrive at the same door. The clock seemed to soften around the edges as if her words had brushed a layer of dust from its story. She closed her eyes and imagined waking the clock not with a key but with a promise to walk slowly. When she opened her eyes, she saw that nothing had changed and everything had become clearer. She felt the bridge beneath her like a long kindness offered by stone. Morning arrived the way a careful hand sets a cup on a saucer. The city did not leap. It turned its face toward the light with a pleasant calm. Windows brightened. Birds began to write their notes upon the air in letters that required no ink. Somewhere a bell rang not with demand, but with an invitation to breathe. Luma understood that the clocks would go on sleeping for a while yet, and that the city would carry this quiet like a hidden pocket within its coat. She also understood that when the clocks finally woke, they would not undo the lesson. They would carry it within their circles. They would teach anyone who listened that there is a difference between a command to hurry and a reminder to be awake. She returned to the shop with the moon and the cup of tea upon its sign. The keeper was wiping the counter and humming a song with no words. They looked at one another as friends do when words would only be decorations on what is already known. "Will you stay the day?" asked the glance of the keeper. Luma considered and then bowed thanks but said that she would walk on because the world had a habit of placing the next gentle lesson just far enough ahead to keep a traveler interested. The keeper packed a small parcel of bread and fruit and wrapped it in cloth and tied the cloth with string. "Here is a pocket of the city," said the smile on the keeper's face. "If you need a measure of calm, open it, and let the scent remind you." Luma accepted the parcel and felt that her pause had become both lighter and wiser. As she left the city by a road bordered with low trees, she looked back only once. From this last rise the roofs made a collection of kind angles. A faint gleam touched the tallest face of the tower, and for a heartbeat she almost thought a hand had moved. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it was only the bright tip of morning. Either way, the lesson did not change. She walked onward with a rhythm in her breath that matched the unhurried heart of the city. Every few steps she imagined a small circle in the air around her, becoming a clock face that marked not seconds but comforts. A circle for cool water. A circle for a cat with a silver ear. A circle for a roll still warm with herbs. A circle for a bell that knew how to wait. The road accepted these circles and placed them along its length the way a patient teacher places little lights along a dark path for students who walk at their own pace. By the time the sun belonged more to day than to dawn, she had found a shaded hollow of grass where she might rest. She lay down and opened the parcel from the keeper and ate with a steady gratitude. She closed her eyes again, and the hollow turned into a room with green curtains and the softest carpet. All around her the gentle clocks of the city kept sleeping inside her memory. Not one of them asked for attention. Not one of them argued the length of the moment. They simply rested, and by resting they gave permission for every muscle in her small body to rest as well. Her paws loosened. Her shoulders unknotted. Her jaw remembered that it could be quiet. Her ears half folded and caught the murmur of bees. She drifted the way a leaf drifts when it has found a part of the stream that has made a decision to be lazy and kind. She let the image of quiet streets fold like soft cloth, and she breathed until the breath became the only map she needed, and she allowed the ground to hold her as if it had always been waiting to do exactly that. She pictured the fountain and the sleeping face beside it and imagined a petal falling from a tree and touching the water, and she knew that the ripple would reach the edge and return, and there was nothing to do but enjoy its travel. She thought of the bell tower full of wooden ribs and window light, and felt her own ribs become a similar house where calm could ring without sound. She told herself a story with almost no words, and the story said that gentle attention is a key that opens every useful door. She promised to carry the lesson to the next village and the next field and the next shore, and to set it down wherever someone looked tired so that rest would seem closer. The air warmed and then cooled and then warmed again, and the day turned itself without complaint, and her body answered with deeper ease. Her thoughts became the smallest boats and drifted into coves where the water forgot how to make waves and learned how to shine. She felt a soft sleep arrive not as a fall but as a tide that had learned her name. She let the image of quiet streets fold like soft cloth, and she breathed until the breath became the only map she needed, and she allowed the ground to hold her as if it had always been waiting to do exactly that. The air warmed and then cooled and then warmed again, and the day turned itself without complaint, and her body answered with deeper ease. Her thoughts became the smallest boats and drifted into coves where the water forgot how to make waves and learned how to shine. She felt a soft sleep arrive not as a fall but as a tide that had learned her name.